everybody. Welcome to our series on making decisions under duress. I'm Dr. Lisa Lang. I'm a TOC-ICO certified expert and the chief TOC expert here at Science of Business. Some people call me the job shop whisperer. I am the head coach for our Velocity Scheduling System coaching program. Presenting today, we've got Brad Stallon. He is a TOC-ICO certified expert. He's also a certified exit planner. He is our TOC pricing expert, and he is the job shop pricing coach, one of our two coaches, along with our main presenter today, who is Bo Gannis. Bo is the throughput accounting guru. He is a CPA and certified management accountant and a recovering cost accountant. While in public accounting, Bo specialized in the application of cost accounting to small and medium-sized manufacturers. Bo has also served as the controller of a specialized steel products manufacturer, developing mine-resistant armor-protected vehicles and other heavy steel products, and will be sharing his experiences along the way in today's session. So with that, I hand it over to Brad and Bo.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. Lisa. And what we want to talk about in this video is, again, realizing when to act. Now, let's go back up to the title slide. You'll notice that we're no longer the two frogs sitting in the pot of boiling water, determining if we should jump or not. We have a bald eagle screeching down to the water about to seize opportunity. And that's what this is about, is seizing opportunities the TOC way. So we want to provoke you to evaluate the need to act sooner versus later in your business to make the best of what you're faced with. Now, we also want to illuminate that for many folks, opportunities abound in times of uncertainty and duress if we can only think clearly about the situation. For many folks, opportunities may come in the form of leveraging your competition's vulnerability to your benefit. So don't miss your chance. Now, we have a counterintuitive outlook about this, okay? So we have a few quotes here we'd like to read. The first is, opportunity often comes disguised in the form of misfortune or temporary defeat. And that's a quote from Napoleon Hill. Second, we have, every situation, no matter how complex it initially looks, is exceedingly simple. And that's from Dr. Ellie Goldratt.
And something that I like to say is that the worst thing is the best thing. I think anyone that's lived long enough has encountered plenty of misfortune. And I've encountered so many misfortunes now that I immediately start thinking about, well, what good thing is going to come from this?
Brad, I agree. And, in working with you and seeing that, we actually have a cloud built around that, how the best thing is the worst thing and the worst thing is the best thing. And that's a really kind of counterintuitive approach or thought that we have there. And I have come to agree with it. The worst thing oftentimes forces you to make those changes that you might have otherwise been putting off that really strike at and go to the core problems many times. And so, the worst thing is in fact the best thing, but nonetheless counterintuitive.
And so many times people that are sailing along with modest performance, let's call that the best thing, have some level of complacency. Mm-hmm. They really aren't prepared for bad things to happen. So a shock to the system, the worst thing, has the opportunity to make things better. However, the transition is going to be tough.
Right. Now, that's a counterintuitive outlook. And the next slide says it meets a realistic outlook. Now, if you're sitting there watching this video, well, you might be saying, this sounds great. How the hell do I do something about this, guys? I mean, really, look at what's going on. Customers are pushing back orders and delaying payments. Suppliers are clamoring for payment in tighter terms. I'm struggling to make payroll. And to top it all off, I show up here and you want me to think about buying a competitor? I can barely buy materials. Well, okay, come back, calm down. Kinda. You're close, but you're a little bit off the mark. Let us explain. Now, before we jump into that explanation, we got to get you in the right frame of mind. And if you've read Napoleon Hill or any of these folks about the success motivation, well, you need to think positive thoughts. That's true. Now, as Dan Kennedy, the marketer, would say, You can sit in the corner of your office and think positive thoughts until you're blue in the face, and guess what? You're not going to make any more money. So we got to couple that positive outlook with some realistic action. But as Warren Buffett says here, be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. There are opportunities out there, and if we're sitting in our office cowering under the pressure and fear, we're not going to look out. We're not going to see what's going on. We want to have a positive outlook, but we want to be realistic about our situation as well. Okay. Times are uncertain. The economic outlook is not so rosy, to put it mildly. But we say, so what? You're not Coca-Cola. You likely have less than 0.5% of all the work available in your specific market. So what we want to do is use this time to grow profitably while improving our cash flow despite the competition struggling to stay afloat. We want to do this strategically, intentionally, with eyes wide open about potential risk and the potential upside. So we're going to again use the TOC buy-in process as a framework for this discussion. First step is, as we know, agree on the objective, and that is to make money now and in the future. Okay. And notice we've changed it. In the previous two videos, we've talked about basically to survive, break even, and stay afloat until economic conditions stabilize. Well, on this one, we're changing the objective. We're switching our mindset. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to make money. We're going to make money now and in the future.
And this is the normal objective that we would expect, to make money now and in the future. And sometimes we restate it as to make more money now and in the future. But we're focused on leveraging this opportunity.
Right. So the next step in the buy-in process is to agree on the problem. And here we have that as the downturn in business activity has negatively impacted my business and the competition. Existing customers are delaying or at best holding steady their current expenditures. Customers will not accept price increases at this time. We have eliminated our backlog of work. The projected level of volume will cause us to lose money, perhaps so much that we do not survive. And then finally, the time it takes to acquire new customers or enter new market segments is longer than our available cash can sustain. So essentially, the problem is this. We don't have enough sources of throughput margin to pull into our business so that we can either be profitable or increase our profitability. This is the problem. Now, we have put this into a very simplified current reality tree that we use to map up our current reality. But net, this is our thinking around this subject, okay? So we're going to read this from bottom to top, and I'll start out with the very bottommost box on the left. Our industry is hurting. And if our industry is hurting, and some competitors are hurting worse than others, and some competitors have no financial buffer, that is, they're unprepared, then unavoidably, some competitors may be at risk of going out of business. Okay, so that takes us to this box here in the middle. Now, if some competitors may be at risk of going out of business, and the competition's customers will need to replace the competitor because the competition's customers are going to survive and keep needing parts, perhaps I can leverage the situation. And so this is what brings us to this webinar today, is to say, hey, look, folks, not everybody is doing well. And they may be like you. They may be, sucking wind, trying to deal with, social distancing and PPE and PPP and all the things that this pandemic and this time has brought with it. Well, guess what? They may be in the exact same boat, or their boat may have more holes in it than yours. And that's the key. In preparing for this presentation, Brad and I have kind of jokingly said it's almost like running from a bear. I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun who I'm running against. And so hopefully we outrun the competitor and the bear gets the competitor.
So this is a different perspective. I suspect most of us are plenty busy thinking about our own situation and not really contemplating what the competitor situation might be. But that's the point of this video today, is to get out of wallowing in your own discomfort and start thinking about, well, hey, it's almost unavoidable, to your point, that other people have the same situation. What can we do about that that will be to our advantage?
Right. I mean, I would read this, Brad, as we know this exists. Where is it? That's the question. We've got to, start, turning over rocks and making phone calls and getting after this thing, because we believe it's out there. And if you can find that diamond in the rough, boy, howdy, talk about being able to capitalize on it right now.
And there's two locations to go. One is the competition's customers, but a little less intuitive is the competitor themselves.
Right. So that's a look at the current reality. Now, going back to our process to say, all right, well, if this is, the objective and the problems and the current reality that we have, what would the criteria for a good solution be? What does good look like? Well, number one, we are better off after executing any potential business deal. Now, that means a few things. That means we have the cash flow to support the deal. It means we are more profitable after the deal. And it also means that we gain access to new jobs, customers, market segments, highly skilled employees, and/or capabilities that complement our business.
We haven't defined what we mean by the deal. The deal could be anything.
Right. And we'll illustrate a few types of deals on the next slide that's coming up. But yeah, to your point, Brad, we haven't defined if we're buying a business, buying assets, buying a revenue stream, buying IP, buying customers, buying jobs. I mean, there's all types of things that could come into the form of a deal. And so that's why we leave this kind of vague, because we're describing the criteria, not the solution itself. So that's number one. Number two is we obtain favorable terms, yet at the same time offer an alternative that is better than otherwise available to our competitor. So that means that we're able to close this transaction quickly with minimal transaction expense. Third, we remove ineffective suppliers from the market. So imagine you went after the bane of your existence, the supplier that undercuts your pricing every time you send a quote out the door. Wouldn't it be nice if they were no longer around? That's just one of the types of ineffective suppliers that we're talking about there. Fourth, we have the ability to take on the competition's work. And then fifth, the terms of our deal protects our interest. So the owner perhaps signs a non-compete agreement, or if we're taking on employees somehow, key employees are under a non-compete agreement or a stay bonus. Essentially, we have a well-formed agreement and we're legally protected.
And the owner in the case of 5A is the competitor owner.
Right. That would be Bubba of Bubba's Machine Shop. Okay, so that's the criteria for a good solution. Now, if we were going to contemplate a few different, more specific solutions, we might add to this, we might modify a few of these, but generally speaking, these were the criteria that we developed for this, okay? So once we have the criteria, now we begin and come to this step of agreeing on the direction of the solution. This is where we project our different alternatives. And I think, as we mentioned before, Brad and I consider it good practice to develop at least 3 alternatives. And you can do that a couple different ways. You can establish kind of a high water mark, and then something more in the middle, and then kind of a low water mark. And we use that high and low water mark to set the boundary conditions of our thinking, and then come back more to the middle and maybe something more practical or realistic, or something that we think we can actually achieve. So first, we might acquire assets. Now, that might take the form of we buy the assets of a failed business from a bank. We buy the assets of a struggling business from the owner. We could buy the machines of a business at a discount from the business owner. And we may buy certain rights, licenses, IP, etc. from a competitor. Okay. Secondly, we might agree to share a percent of sales with an owner of a business in decline and receive selected items and inventory on consignment, subject to the sales sharing agreement. So I might come to Brad, my competitor, and say, hey, Brad, I realize you're about to hit the dirt here soon. I tell you what, why don't I take on your jobs? I'll give you 7% of revenue for the next year, year and a half, 2 years, whatever it is. And I'll take on the work. I'll perform the job and give you a cut of the sales. Third, we gain control of a competitor via contract or acquire a controlling interest in a competitor. And here we were kind of contemplating, think about those disgruntled family members. We run into a lot of folks and a lot of shops that have what I might call splintered or fractured ownership. Grandfather started the business and it passed to the son and the brother unfortunately passed away, but it went to 7 of his children, and they're all, they hate the uncle, and the uncle hates the nieces and nephews, and they don't get along. And through a weird series of arrangements, through state law, through trust, through estates, gifting, you find out the disgruntled family in total owns more than half the business. Well, geez, if you could get all these folks in one room and direct all that anger to the other family member, you might be in the position of taking over the business. Okay, so that's just one such situation. Fourth, we present a situational or time-based acquisition offer to the competitor. So it may take the form of something like this. A CPA firm I work with went out to local competitors and said to all basically the single operator shops, and this was very revealing about the CPA industry. Dear Bo, if you are working at your desk and have a heart attack while filling out your last tax return, I will buy your business for 80 cents on the dollar and give that to your widow. Now, alternatively, I'm going to go ahead and give you this agreement, but if any time in the next 3 years you just say, I've had it, I am done with these tax returns, I'm walking out of here, come to me, I'll buy your business for $1 of, $1 for dollar of every revenue dollar that you have in the business. So situationally, if someone were to pass away or go into bad health, that might trigger the agreement, or we could say something like over a 2 or 3 year term. Now, in this case, in the current situation, we might leverage the pandemic. We might leverage, before you go bankrupt, come to me and let's have this agreement already basically in the works and in place. I'll take over the machines, the equipment, the people, what I see fit, and on a favorable term basis, and we can move forward with that. So again, these are directions of the solution. All right. Now it's up to you to decide what you do, and you may have different directions of the solution. It may be that you finally, as a minority share owner, buy out the rest of the shareholders and take control of the business you're in today. Okay. So, as we say in that disclaimer, we're not necessarily recommending any one of these. We're just throwing these out as different alternatives that you might think through, consider, and evaluate. And then ultimately, you decide with your team and your folks what makes the most sense for you.
I would say that most business owners have some degree of capability regarding these things, but probably not enough. Maybe they're used to dealing with their attorney when they're interacting with somebody selling them something.
Mm-hmm.
Later, we're going to offer some of our services, but don't think that you need to have clarity about how to do this. We're trying to get your mind active about what just might be possible.
Yeah, and Brad, I'll reveal an inside secret here. Many professionals, especially from a CPA and from an attorney standpoint, the ones I've interacted with, are great at the routine. They're great at the day-to-day tax returns, the audits, the formation of an entity, and thinking through some of the tax consequences of business transactions. Where a lot of professionals have a very large blind spot is when it comes to transactions, like these, acquiring assets, or if they're acquiring IP rights, or if they're acquiring revenue streams, or if you're breaking things out. If you do one of these things, this may be a very non-traditional type of deal, and it's likely that your CPA and your attorney really haven't been exposed to the thinking around this. They haven't been involved with these types of things in the past. So it really is a new and different space that, unless you operate here and are familiar with it, a lot of folks that you may be working with in your core network may just not have a lot of exposure to.
So to further that, in the merger and acquisitions industry, there are transaction attorneys and transaction CPAs, accounting firms. And it's rare that a seller will find that their existing attorney and an existing CPA is capable of doing the transaction. So you go to a professional that's a transaction attorney or a transaction accountant.
Right. And the reason for that is you can trigger a whole host of things. It can get complicated in the actual transaction. Now, again, we're not trying to get caught up in how just yet. What we want to do is get your mind focused on what may be possible. Yes, there's going to be obstacles and things, and that's what we're about to jump into. But nonetheless, if we can identify what's out there, we can piece together how that happens. Okay. Now, we've mentioned this in the past on the other videos, but anytime we pick any direction of the solution, there are going to be predicted negative effects. When we make a decision about this, here are some of the predicted negative effects and the objectives to overcome those that we have identified. So I'm going to read 1A first. We may disclose confidential information about our business to the competition. 1B, customers, employees, lenders, and owners on both sides of this agreement may negatively react to learning about the potential agreement. Can you imagine your uncle realizing that you're trying to buy out your father and take a controlling interest in a business that he thought he was going to take over? That might not be exactly where you want to be, okay? Well, we need to take action to protect our interest. That means running ahead of this, creating the game plan, and really thinking these things through, okay? Second, I'm going to read 2A now. We may overpay for certain items in the deal. We could totally overvalue the assets, the business, the IP, any number of things. I mean, this happens at the highest of highest levels. Public companies do this all the time. They'll acquire a company, and then you'll see 3-4 years later, they're writing off half of the IP they acquired or half of the assets just because they weren't valued properly. 2B, we may acquire liabilities or future obligations, encumbered assets, defective assets. And defective could mean from a legal perspective, we don't have good title, or it could mean from a physical perspective, we have a broken machine on our hands. We could get problematic employees, difficult customers, and bad jobs. So what does that mean? Well, the objective there to overcome these predicted negative effects is that we perform rigorous due diligence before committing to a deal. We know what we're getting ourselves into. Third, 3A here, employees or customers may leave after the deal is signed. So can you imagine acquiring a business or a group of customers, and the largest customer representing 35% of the work just walks away the next week? Man, talk about holding the bag. 3B, the agreement's terms and conditions may be defective. So we may not have a properly written contract, one that's legally binding. There may be some out in this that we didn't identify. The objective here is we have a well-considered deal put into place. And this is probably where those advisors and transaction attorneys and CPAs comes into mind. Fourth, we insulate the deal from third parties that may block the deal. So the negative effect here is that sometimes you get the professionals, the attorneys, the CPAs, other shareholders, and the lenders, and all they do is throw cold water on everything. And I'll never forget one of the firms I was working with. We were going through a transaction, and the managing partner of our firm that was on our side, helping our client try to acquire another business, he was in the meeting and just got so fed up. He told our client, he said, listen, you get in there with the other owner, y'all hash it out, tell us what you want done, and we'll do it. He said, but quit listening to all these darn attorneys. They're going to end up screwing this whole thing up. And that's exactly what they did. Him and the other owner went to our conference room. An hour later, they were shaking hands. They had a deal. They turned to the attorneys and said, figure it out. And we were done. So, people, attorneys are great. Attorneys have a mindset that everything's going to go wrong and everyone's trying to screw you. That's not a bad mindset if you have that kind of person on your side. But I think, Brad, you have a great story about the, your experience with attorneys and having someone that helps you think it through, but helps you, not just throws obstacles in your way.
Yeah, my attorney always first embraced my goal and then told me all of the things that could go wrong. But then he helped me overcome all those things that could go wrong so to achieve the goal. I think the general statement on these other other people is that they have vested interests. And so you have to be aware that they have vested interests. Don't be naive about it.
Right. So those would be how we might overcome some of the predictive negative effects. Again, if you have a very specific implementation or different direction of the solution, there may be more or different negative effects that come out of that selection. Okay. Now, the last step that we have here is to agree on the objectives to overcome implementation obstacles. And what we wanted to do here was short cycle what we're doing. We want you to watch this video and take action. We don't want you to watch the video, call your attorney, talk to your CPA, run it by your spouse, think about it for 6 weeks, and then sweat about it another 3 weeks till you get the PPP approved. That's not the point here. We want you to be thinking about this and acting on this. And so as our first objective here, well, we want to identify potential targets. And that could be just as simple as taking the piece of paper on your desk right now and going competitor number 1, competitor number 2, pain in the rear number 3, whatever it is. Think about who may be out there that's a potential target. Second, we want to learn about the competition's current business outlook. Okay, that's a key. So how can we do that? Well, if we know who their customers are and we share customers, well, if our customer has, knocked back our work, it's very likely that they're pulling back work from the competitor. Third, we want to strategically set up a meeting to discuss our mutual situation. Maybe you go to lunch with the crosstown competitor. Maybe you start out by commiserating how terrible your business is doing, and then allow them to commiserate likewise. And maybe, and there's all kinds of tactics around this and negotiating and speaking to folks, but one of the things you want to do is listen. And I say that because listening is, I'll share this with you, as a AAA personality and a very strong-willed personality, listening is not necessarily my first, best, mainmost skill, okay? And so I have to, actively make myself listen. And I find that when I get done listening, I'm kind of mentally drained a little bit. It takes some effort on my part. Now, you may not be, as AAA of a personality as I am, and that's probably to your benefit. But that being said, listening is something that requires active thought, active intention. And so listen to what they're saying. And they may be trying to tell you, I want to get out. Dude, I am 63. I got grandkids. I got a pond. I want to fish with my grandson. I could give a crap about making these parts. Well, if that's what they're saying, let's help them go fishing. Okay. And then fourth, we make our move. So again, Brad and I, one of the things to share with you from the job shop pricing system is that folks that take action get results. And that's true in the velocity scheduling system. It's true in the job shop pricing system. It's true in life. Nothing happens until you do something. Now, I know that's boy howdy, that's just a profound statement there. But net, we want you guys to short cycle this and get this top of mind. Get out of the, as Brad said, get out of that dark cloud of uncertainty and start pushing through this and making some inroads on this.
So a couple of thoughts, Bo. One would be that if you have a competitor and you and the competitor share a customer, then that customer might be also a very good source of information.
Yep.
And they might reflect back on how they're viewing you and how they're viewing the competitor. In other of our videos within job shop pricing, I talk about your suppliers and how they just love to go on and give up excellent competitive information that they shouldn't be talking about in the first place. But it just occurs to me that, hey, if you've got a common machine vendor or a common material vendor, and that vendor comes in for a meeting, sit them down and just interview the heck out of them, because they'll give away all kinds of interesting information.
This would be, just the implementation obstacles. But as we said, the point here is this. Let's short cycle this. Let's get in front of this and let's start taking a leadership position in the market and moving out there and making some moves, because the opportunities are out there. So guys, in closing, we would say, talk to us before you miss your chance. If you'd like help applying the concepts from this webinar to your shop, we're offering a free, confidential, no obligation financial health and cash management checkup. Now, obviously, if you're reaching out to us about this, this may take a little bit different form than what we've offered in the prior 2 videos. We're still going to send you the Excel file that we use to assess your financial situation. And during that checkup, we're going to review your financial projections and discuss potential scenarios, maybe these directions of the solution that you're considering here. We're going to review your balance sheet for potential sources of cash, and we may talk about leverage, how much debt you might be able to take on, what's open to you, who's out there for you. We may evaluate the sources of cash that are currently available to you, and then we may discuss the competitive landscape and the opportunities that you may have out there. And so if this is of interest to you, we say reach out and talk to us, do these implementation obstacles, identify your competition, get the meeting set up, but reach out to us and, do that before you miss that chance, because we'd hate for you to be well poised to come out of this better than ever, but yet miss that chance. So if you're interested in speaking to us, go to www.jobshoppricing.com/checkup to request a checkup. Thank you guys for being here with us. So this has been the 3rd video in this series of Making Decisions Under Duress, and stay tuned for more to come. Thanks.